Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Talking on Eggshells, Soft Skills for Hard Conversations by Sam Horn, narrated by Sam Horn. As Henry Adams said, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. I am so grateful to my many teachers for the enduring influence they've had on me and countless others. May this book continue their legacy by teaching people the skills that help us communicate collaboratively, graciously, and proactively. Introduction. When I was a little girl, my parents were embroiled in a Cold War. Dad was emotionally distant. Mom was emotionally wounded. They didn't yell or fight, quite the opposite. They were honorable people who taught us kids to do the right thing. They just didn't know what to say to heal years of hurt feelings and missed connections, so they didn't say anything. As you can imagine, that approach trickled down, and my siblings and I tended to shy away from uncomfortable conversations, too. Later, I was in a relationship with a bully. I didn't know he was a bully going into it. On paper, he looked like a Renaissance man. When he planned every detail of our dates, I thought, cool. I didn't know it was a warning sign of his need for control that would turn into jealousy and character assassination. I tiptoed around him as I never knew what would trigger an attack. Without realizing it at the time, I learned to talk on eggshells in two of the major relationships in my life. I know what it feels like, and it doesn't feel good. It's exhausting constantly being on edge because you're trying to say the right thing and worrying you'll say the wrong thing. Those relationships were filled with regrets. That's why I'm on a mission when it comes to this topic. I believe that if we see a problem and think, somebody ought to do something about that, we should act because we're as much as somebody as anybody. My thinking was, there has to be a better way to communicate with people in good times and bad, a way to have honest conversations instead of ignoring what's happening. Think on our feet and say what we mean in the moment. Hold people accountable for treating us with the respect we deserve. If any of that resonates with you, you're in the right place. Are you talking on eggshells? Civil rights activist Audre Lorde said, "My silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you." Does it feel like you're talking on eggshells these days? Are you dealing with someone who complains, shames, and blames? Are you working or living with people who take their frustration out on you? Are you at odds with someone who has polar opposite beliefs? Are you being targeted by a bully, controller, or manipulator? Are you in a relationship with someone who's aloof, distant, or unavailable? Are you facing and feeling increased stress, anxiety, or burnout due to divisiveness? If so, you're not alone. A 2021 report from management consulting firm McKinsey reveals rudeness is on the rise, incivility is getting worse. The irony is, we're not taught what to say when people are unfair or unkind. We often don't say anything, or say the first thing that comes to mind, which often makes matters worse. What if there were ways to confidently handle challenging situations in the moment, instead of thinking of the perfect response on the way home? That's not an impossible dream. That's what you're about to learn in this book. What is Tung Fu? Activist Mother Teresa said the world is full of good people. If you can't find one, be one. In case you're curious about this work's backstory, it's based on a communication process I developed more than 20 years ago called Tung Fu. When the book of that name was originally published, I had an opportunity to go on a media tour. I was flying to my first stop and needed to check a quote to make sure I had it right for an interview. I pulled out a copy of the book from my purse. A woman seated across from me glanced at the cover, yanked the book out of my hands, and said, "That looks interesting. Tell me what it's about." I said, "Well, it's how to deal with difficult people without becoming one yourself." She said, "Oh, I wish I'd had your book on the plane I was on before this one. I was seated next to the most obnoxious man. I could have used your book. I would have hit him with it." That is not what Tung Fu was about, and it's not what this book is about. If someone's being inappropriate, it's not about hitting back, getting mad, or getting even. It's not about putting people in their place. It's about putting ourselves in people's places so we can respond with compassion instead of react with contempt. It's about how to be the quality person we want to be, even when other people aren't. How do we do that? Recently, I was listening to the always intriguing Guy Kawasaki podcast, Remarkable People, while on the treadmill. He was interviewing negotiation expert Barry Nailbuff, who said something so profound I jumped off the treadmill to write it down. He said, the goal in tough situations is to fight fire with water. That is the purpose of this book in 4 words. If someone picks a fight with us, we don't fight back, we flow back. If someone is ranting, raging, resenting, or resisting, we keep our cool. We continue to treat them with respect and use positive, proactive responses to create rapport, so most of the time they're motivated to respond in kind. That said, please use the material in this book in a safe and logical manner. It is best to seek independent professional counseling and/or legal advice if you're dealing with a challenging individual to ensure the suggestions you receive are tailored for your specific circumstances. The purpose of this book is to teach how to be a force for good. Anthropologist Jane Goodall said, "What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you're going to make." You're about to learn what to say and not say in character-building situations you face almost every day. You're about to learn the social skills we all wish we'd been taught in school, along with math, science, and history. In our increasingly divisive world, someone's got to set an example of decency and diplomacy. Why not us? As the beloved actress Betty White said, "I just made it my business to get along with people so I can have fun. It's that simple." Did I mention fun? I also hope you have fun listening to this book, that you share it with family members and coworkers, and that it catalyzes meaningful discussions on how to get along better with just about anyone, anytime, anywhere. How to get the most value from this book. Personal development pioneer Earl Nightingale said, "Getting along well with other people is still the world's most needed skill. With it, there is no limit to what a person can do." I know you're busy, so I've done my best to make this book real-world relatable. Each chapter of parts 2, 3, and 4 features a question about a sensitive situation you might face and a variety of constructive ways to respond instead of react in that situation. I hope you find them valuable. I hope you'll use these insights daily. As self-help expert Tony Robbins said, if you've made a decision and haven't taken action, you really haven't made a decision. You'll notice each chapter ends with a words to lose, words to use reminder. In fact, I returned to a medical center as a patient several years after doing a training there. The receptionist saw me walk in, beckoned me over, and pointed to a printed reminder card still taped to her desk. She said, "Sam, I never understood why people were rude to me when I was nice to them. Then I took your workshop and realized I was using what you call fighting phrases. No wonder people got upset with me. They thought I was arguing with them." She pointed at her card. "This has made such a difference. It helps me catch and correct. If I'm about to tell someone what they should do, I stop mid-sentence and change that command into a courteous request. I enjoy coming to work now because these friendly phrases have made this a much friendlier place." When you finish the book, don't put it away. Keep it on your device so you can access it in trying times. You may even want to start your day by turning to a chapter, any chapter. With more than 200 quotes on how to be a good person, chances are you'll hear an insight that is just what you need to recommit to setting an example of grace under pressure. Ready? Let's go. Part 1. Get comfortable with conflict. Are you ready for my Elvis Presley impression? He said, "When things go wrong, don't go with them." Chapter 1. Why do we talk on eggshells? News commentator Van Jones said, "Civility isn't an optional value, it is the key to civilization." The example for this chapter starts with, "I'm conflict averse. My parents fought all the time when I was a teen. I would hide in my room with my pillow over my ears, silently begging them to stop. I know this still affects me. I head the other direction at the first sign of incivility. Help!" First, if you identify with this scenario, kudos to you for recognizing this tendency in yourself. You're right. If our childhood years were full of unresolved, angry conflict, or if we've had unpleasant confrontations in the past, we may be reluctant to bring that back into our life now. The thing is, ignoring incivility doesn't make it go away. It makes it worse. In a moment, I'll show how to change a conflict-averse label because it perpetuates an unnecessary and unhealthy fear of conflict. Let's start by identifying some of the reasons we tiptoe around sensitive situations, even when we're smart, talented adults who otherwise have our act together. I had an opportunity to ask Parisa Khosrove, former senior vice president in charge of global relations for CNN worldwide, why she thinks we tend to avoid difficult conversations. She said, "I think we're taught to. One of the reasons our family came to the U.S. from Iran was because it's a country with free speech, yet many of us are self-censoring these days. I remember my uncle telling me there are only 2 things you can't talk about in the U.S. Never ask someone how much money they make, and never ask people how old they are." She continued, "That was interesting because in Iran, those were points of pride, but here they're off limits. Now, there is so much off limits: religion, politics, democracy, vaccinations. Even with family members, I sometimes don't go there with them on these topics because I know if I do, we'll end up not talking to each other." Does that sound familiar? What's a situation in your life where you may be talking on eggshells or avoiding off-limits topics with someone? Ask yourself if any of the following rationales might be causing you to self-censor or be reluctant to speak up. Why are we reluctant to speak up? Author Carrie Patterson said, "The mistake many of us make in our crucial conversations is we believe that we have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend." Do you relate to any of these motives for self-censorship? Do you believe that telling the truth will ruin a relationship? Ask yourself if any of these are relevant for you. I don't want to say something I might regret. I don't want to make things worse. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want to annoy, offend, or anger. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm afraid of repercussions. Do you relate to any of those motives for self-censorship? Did you notice that all those reasons are fear-based projections of things going wrong? What if, instead of projecting worst-case scenarios, we project best-case scenarios? What if, instead of assuming that truth-telling will result in losing a friend, we understand that compassionate truth-telling can be the key to keeping a friend? What if we could learn how to clearly and respectfully express how we feel and what we want, so people aren't annoyed, offended, or angered? What if, when emotions are running high, we know how to use words and phrases that prevent resentment and produce receptivity? What if our ability to initiate honest conversations results in people thanking us for having the courage to broach something that's been bothering them too? If we could do all that, and that's what you're about to learn how to do, then we can stop talking on eggshells and start talking authentically. Stop talking on eggshells. Start talking authentically. Author Mary Morrissey shares one of my favorite quotes, and that is, "Hold the vision, not the circumstances." Let me share an example of what can happen when you choose to hold the vision of what you do want instead of letting circumstances rule the day. Then you'll have a chance to identify your habitual communication style to determine whether it's been helping or hurting you. A friend's 20-year-old granddaughter, let's call her Brittany, always thought of herself as shy and conflict-averse. Yet she summoned the courage to talk to her boss about something that went wrong at work. Brittany works at a Salvation Army store. She has developmental challenges, and this is her first job in customer service. She prides herself on doing her best to take good care of everyone who comes in the store and was excited when her boss told her she was up for a promotion. The very next day, though, her boss told Brittany she was in danger of losing her job. Brittany was devastated. Before, she probably would have dissolved in tears, gone home, and spiraled into depression. This time, though, she used an approach her therapist taught her. She went to her boss's office, asked for 5 minutes of her time, and said, "Please help me understand how I could be up for a promotion yesterday and you're threatening to fire me today." The manager explained that a customer had accused Brittany of being incredibly rude and thought she should be reprimanded for her poor service. Brittany remembered the incident the manager was referring to. She explained that the customer wanted to return a used mattress for a refund. Their store policy is not to accept returned mattresses if the protective plastic cover has been opened. Brittany said she had politely explained this, and the customer became irate. Now that the manager had the full story, she ended up apologizing and thanked Brittany for enforcing their store policy, even though it hadn't been easy. As a result, Brittany is still working at the store and got the promotion she'd been promised. Let's put this in perspective. That promotion wouldn't have happened if Brittany had avoided the hard conversation and not asked the manager why she'd reversed her decision. Those 6 words, "Could you please help me understand," turned what could have been an uncomfortable confrontation into a clarifying conversation. Let's lose the word confront. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, "Whoever battles with monsters better see that it does not turn him into a monster." Did you know the word confront is defined as to face, especially in challenge, to oppose an enemy? No wonder we're reluctant to confront others. Such an aggressive, warlike word makes us feel like we're going into battle. It has a connotation of violence and intimidation. Look what happens when we change the word confront to something less aggressive like clarify. Imagine how it would feel if, instead of challenging someone's decision, we asked if they could please help us understand the rationale behind their decision. Asking is the opposite of attacking. It is open-ended and seeks to gather information instead of assuming the other person made an inexcusable decision. It helps us feel more comfortable bringing up issues that are bothering us because we're not opposing others or challenging them. We are simply, as author Stephen Covey suggested, seeking to understand. How about you? Did someone recently make a decision that hurt you or that didn't make any sense? What did you do? Did you stuff down your feelings and walk away, yet you're still simmering about it? Did you tell that person exactly how you felt? In your head? It may not be too late to approach that person again and say, "Could you please help me understand?" Who knows? Something might have gone on behind the scenes that explains or justifies what happened. Discussing this with them could lead to a mutual aha that heals the hurt. If nothing else, the other person gets to hear your point of view instead of making a one-sided decision based on limited or inaccurate information. Perhaps most importantly, when you take responsibility for addressing what happened, instead of ignoring your feelings and continuing to feel unfairly treated, you have a chance to correct the situation. Staying silent only perpetuates a situation. Let's replace negative labels. Tennis player Martina Navratilova said labels are for clothing. Labels are not for people. There are several lessons to be learned from Brittany's example. First, by asking for clarification instead of ignoring the issue, she was able to explain the facts of the situation to her boss rather than potentially losing her job. Equally important, she chose to put her conflict-averse label in the past. If Brittany told herself she was afraid of conflict, that's how she would continue to be. That label would have defined and defeated her and relegated her to avoiding conflict at all costs. Now, she sees herself as someone who asks for clarification. She models Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck's theory that we either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. A fixed mindset essentially says, I am who I am, and I can't change that. My talents, intelligence, and abilities are set in stone, and there's nothing I can do about them. A growth mindset says, I believe I have the agency to evolve and get better. With effort, drive, and perseverance, I can develop my abilities and improve my situation. Have you called yourself conflict averse? If so, it's time to update that label. One way to put labels in the past, and by the way, this applies to any label, whether it's I'm shy, I'm lazy, I'm a procrastinator, I'm a klutz, is to say I used to, and now for example, I used to be conflict averse, and now I know things only get better if I address them, not avoid them. I used to procrastinate, and now I act on what's important so I create results, not regrets. I used to get angry when people mistreated me, and now I ask for clarification to find out what's behind their decision. I used to rehash what people did to me and tell others about it, and now I bring it up with the person responsible so we have a chance to have a fresh start. Another way to put labels in the past and feel more comfortable speaking up for yourself is to figure out what your habitual communication conflict style is. The 4 communication conflict styles. U.S. President Ronald Reagan said, "Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means." Most of us default to a habitual style when things go wrong, which is usually based on what was modeled by others during our childhood. However, there's an interesting twist. We've either internalized and followed the example that was set, or, and this is a big or, we have consciously chosen to do the opposite of what was modeled for us. For example, a young man told me he'd grown up in a verbally abusive family. Instead of using it as an excuse to berate others, he used it as an incentive to never raise his voice and to speak calmly even during an argument. I've named the 4 communication conflict styles starting with the letter A so they're easier to remember. Review them and consider, which is my normal style? What was modeled in my home when I was growing up? Have I followed what was modeled, or have I chosen to do things differently? The first style of communication, A, is for avoid. We steer clear of a challenging person or situation and try not to think about them or it. We live in a river of denial and do our best not to ponder what's wrong because we don't want to or don't know how to deal with it. We hope it will go away or somehow get better. The second A is for accommodate. We give in and go along to get along. We try to keep the peace so we don't challenge people. We do it their way and acquiesce to their belief or way of thinking. People pleasers who seek approval from others often fall in this category. The third A is anger. We vent how we feel and take our frustration out on others. Either we get mad in indignation or righteousness, or we use anger as a tool of intensity to get other people to back down. We grow loud and intense when things go wrong, and we use intensity to win or to get our way. The fourth A is assert. We approach the other person and seek a win-win resolution or try to navigate a better path forward for the situation or relationship. We understand that people can't read our mind, and it's up to us to speak up when we're not getting what we want or being treated the way we want. Which style is your default? Be honest. Is your go-to style supporting your success or sabotaging it? Is it contributing to quality relationships or compromising them? From now on, be like Brittany. Accept that things don't get better by themselves. Update your label and choose to address conflict instead of avoid it, accommodate it, or get angered by it. Rather than seeing conflict as a confrontation, see it as asking for clarification. By doing this, you will evolve your ability to address whatever comes up instead of playing ostrich, burying your head in feelings and wishing it would somehow magically improve on its own. A woman raised her virtual hand during a webinar I was presenting and said, "I saw a live TV interview with the playwright Wendy Wasserstein recently, and she said, 'I really worked at becoming more assertive, and now none of my friends will talk to me.' She may have intended that to be tongue-in-cheek witty. The thing is, she expressed my secret fear. I told the woman, 'I'm glad you brought that up. I don't mean to infer that assertiveness happens overnight and works perfectly every time. Being comfortable with conflict is a mindset and a skill set. It takes time to develop. The good news is there are specific ways to be gracious instead of grating when you assert yourself so people are more receptive to what you say." In the next chapter, I'll reveal the 6 steps to ISA, interpersonal situation awareness, that I shared with her. Developing these abilities can help you read the room.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?